Hello everybody, this is Shannon with Beads and Babble. I am back with a tutorial that is going to be very different from the normal ones, which usually has some sort of bead or metal work in it. Today I'm going to do a basic solder video. Now, there are many ways to do this, but I'm going to make this as beginner friendly as possible because there are lots of things, different ways to set up your soldering station. Today I'm going to focus on trying to make it as simple as possible. Don't let all the things here overwhelm you. I'm just bringing things into the picture that you can collect over time, but I also have. So your first thing is you want to make sure that your soldering surface is safe, meaning fireproof. This is just a simple porcelain or ceramic tile here. There are special boards you can buy if you wish. A lot of times people use cooking sheets. Tiles always worked great for me for a portable place to, if I needed to set up real quick. And then this is a solderite board. There are different also medias to solder on, like charcoal, honeycomb, all different types. This is just readily available, and it is a nice surface to begin soldering on. And you can flip it over when one side gets really bad. And then I soldered on both sides, of course, but you'll find that you can just flip it over. It will eventually deteriorate and start to crack. With charcoal blocks, you can kind of sand the surface smooth. This one, not as much. Also, you'll want some safety equipment, which goggles, safety goggles, glasses. I wear safety glasses already that my lenses are because I wear glasses, corrective glasses, so I already have those on. You'll want to put your hair up if you have long hair, just to keep any accidents from happening accidentally. Don't want to catch your hair on fire. That would be bad. So the simple basics would be, like I said, the work surface. So set yourself up with a fireproof work surface. Get yourself a solderite or charcoal brick or honeycomb brick for soldering your components on, which this will go on top of your tile, your fireproof tile. You can get an inexpensive torch. This is a very inexpensive torch that I've got at either Lowe's or Home Depot. It's simply just a butane torch that you fill at the bottom with butane. You can get the butane also at the hardware store. Get the best butane that you can get. It makes a difference. This one has very little adjustability here, but you really won't need it for starting out. This will do small projects like rings, which I'm going to show you how to do a ring, earring backs onto earring components, stuff like that. It won't do your larger pieces, like if you have a huge pendant or something like that, or thicker gauged metal. You'll require a stronger torch, but this will get you started. This is a very beginner friendly tutorial, so I'm focusing on just the beginnings, you learning the technique, because honestly, soldering, to get good at it, just takes a lot of practice, and because there is definitely a learning curve, and you'll have to find what setup works best for you. Like I said, there's a gazillion setups out there, but honestly, it's whatever works for you, and you'll have to play around. Like there's a ton of different fluxes. There's, paste flux, liquid flux, there's gold flux, silver, there's all kinds of flux out there. There's also soldering paste that has the flux in it, so you don't need the flux. And then you have also boric acid solution that is like a fire scale coating that you can do as well, which I recommend is a good thing for a beginner to have. It's very simple to make. denatured alcohol and boric acid mixed together in equal parts, and or tell the, you know, you can't get the boric acid to dissolve, but there's all kinds of recipes out there for that you can learn, but I'm not going to try to overwhelm you. So I really like this flux. I just started using it actually. It's a Bench Basics Smart Flux. It does prevent fire scale, and it's fluoride free. And it's, so this kind of does both, and I really like it. And I also bought this flux container, and it very evenly distributes the flux onto the piece, which I really liked. It was a really good investment for me. And then you'll need, for dipping into your pickle, you do not want to use anything steel. That will contaminate your pickle. So you'll need copper tongs or plastic tongs. And what I'm using here is a simple mug heater for my pickle. And you can, and there's different pickles. You can buy commercial pickles. You can mix your own pickle. You can look up and find out which one you prefer. I usually use a pH down and distilled water mix. It works really good because I can go to the pool section at, you know, Walmart or wherever and grab it, and it does great, and it works for me. And then you'll need, of course, some quenching water. I do not recommend that you use your pickle as your quenching pot as well. I usually just pour distilled water into my water as well, and you should have some distilled water in a glass container and the pickle in a glass container too. Try to avoid any metal with your pickle because it will corrode it and stuff. So these ball jars work really great for a beginning setup, especially for small projects, because they're not huge or anything, and you can put the lids on it tightly and you won't have to worry about any corrosion. And then you can pick up a coffee mug warmer pretty much anywhere, or candle warmer. And you can eventually build, you know, work up into a crock pot or a pickle pot of some sort. I have my permanent setup behind me that has my crock pot and everything. But this works great for beginners. And like I said, these copper prongs are specifically for the pickle. And the reason why is because steel will ruin your pickle. So you do not want anything going in there. You'll need a soldering pick. And I use these stainless steel tweezers for placing and also for gripping my components after I solder them, and moving and turning them around and placing my solder on the place that I'm soldering. I also keep kind of like a polishing pad. This is a pre-pregnated polishing pad that you can pick up anywhere. You can also use a sunshine yellow. And of course, this is just for beginning, because you can get, oh gosh, you can go into polishing forever, all the things that you can do. Another good investment is these particular ring pliers. They're half round pliers, so this side is rounded and this side is straight and square. This is great for rounding rings and such, but these are a good investment. Also, this is a small needle file, but it's a number 2 half round. If you're going to purchase a file, actually I think this is smooth on the one side, but we'll make it work. But if you're going to, I would do a half round file, so you'll have a flat side on one side and a curved side on the other. And that is a good starter file, and you can get a lot done with a number 2 half round file. And then this is just a cheap ring sizer that you can, it's adjustable, so you can fit it on and then find it. If you're making rings for yourself, you can just literally, you know, test fit yourself, but these are inexpensive. You'll need a ring mandrel, because this will, you can wind your wire on here to size it as well. You can put texture on your rings. You can round out your rings. So this is a good investment too. I mean, it's honestly, if you're going to be making rings, you need a ring mandrel. And a lot of times you can test the, since this is a 10, test your ring sizer against your ring mandrel to make sure that it is right, and it is. So that's always a good barometer to start. And then there's a lot of things that go into ring sizing, like the thickness of the material and all that stuff, but I'm not going to even go in there because, like I said, I'm going to keep this very rudimentary, beginner friendly. I'm going to put that over. I brought out a nylon mallet because this will be used to tap out the ring to make it round and flat again. Also need a bench block to flatten the ring, as well as we're going to round it out with the ring mandrel and then flatten it out with the bench block. These you do not need, but these are just different texturing hammers. So I'm going to use them to show you how to put texture on the rings as well. And then last but not least, we're going to be using hard solder. Hard solder is the best match for silver, and it's your first step in soldering. You go hard solder, medium, soft, extra, or easy, excuse me, extra easy. And what I'll do with this is round solder. And you can buy sheet or a wire solder, but I usually buy the round solder and then I will hammer it flat. And you don't want your solder dirty, and you don't want to sand it so much that you take away the consistency of the different alloys that go in here, but just give it a little easy clean with some emery paper, and I believe this is 600 or 400. Doesn't have to be very much. Or you can use also the polishing cloth. I don't usually like to use this because it has a particular I don't know, some kind of chemical in here that polishes, so I try not to use that on the solder. So just some straight up emery paper, because you want to keep your solder clean, your metals clean. And then we're going to use some 16 gauge round sterling silver wire today. I purchased this at Rio Grande, which is a really good supplier for metals. There's many, so I don't recommend going any thinner than 16 gauge on rings. You can do 18, but if they're gonna bend, they're gonna be very, even if you harden them, harden them, they're gonna bend. And this is still a light gauge wire, but if you're making stack rings, because the more, you know, if you're gonna stack them, you'll have more stability in with the rings. It'll be less likely for them to bend. But 16 gauge is a fairly nice gauge for a ring, for a simple ring, especially to begin practicing with. So, and this is dead soft wire because it'll work harden and get hardened as it goes. And then you will also need some flush cutters for cutting your wire. It's never a bad idea to invest in good cutters, but you'll also want to have some cutters that you can not worry about taking chunks out of as well. And a lot of times I will snip off the end so it's flush to begin with, and never throw away any of your bits and pieces, because they can all be either refined or you can use them, and when you get more involved in your metal work, you can melt them down and pour them into ingots and all that kind of stuff. So never throw away your silver, because you can also send them back to Rio Grande and they'll give you credit for them if you don't use them for anything else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the ring mandrel and the sterling silver here, and I'm just going to kind of run it through my fingers to get it a little straighter for me to begin with. And I'm going to take the mandrel and I'm going to put it, I'm a little crowded here, so forgive me if I get out of out of frame. I think I'll go this way, might be a little easier. So I'm gonna put it on 8, and I'm gonna just push the wire with my fingers around the mandrel. And I'm gonna do this a couple times. So I have a couple rings here. It's almost like making jump rings. And so you're gonna end up with a coil of wire like this. Now I'm gonna take my flush cutters with the flush slide towards the cutoff product, because that's which ones I'll be doing. And then I'm gonna put the excess wire to the side. So this is my coil. This is 2 rings. So, and just like in the jump ring video, we're going to cut flush ends here. This one's a cut, this was the other side, and I gotta cut this one flush. I'm just making sure both ends are cut flush. And like I said, don't waste any of those bits, even those tiny ones. All right, so we've got some semicircle rings here. Now, the way I was taught in the beginning was to form a D. But as I started working, there was a very good instructor that showed that just leave it in the circle and saw cut it through, and you'll get a flush side on both sides. But a lot of people are at this stage they don't have a jewelry saw or anything. So we're just gonna use the flush cutters and the file. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna open these up, and I'm gonna step aside for just a second because I'm gonna grab a flat file real quick. Sorry about that. I was going to grab, so this is a flat file, so it's flat on both sides. But if you're gonna buy a half round file, because you'll get more use out of it. I've got a ton of files everywhere from years of metalwork. So steady, whenever you're filing, you always want to be on a surface with you don't want to be filing up in the air. And you're only going to be taking off metal on the upstroke, not the back. So a lot of times you just go up, release, sawing back and forth doesn't get you anywhere faster because the file only cuts up on the upstroke. And then I'm just going to take it over here, and I'm just going to go, and you don't have to do a lot of pressure. You don't need it. And a lot of times you'll see the metal getting shiny where it's being filed, and you'll see the difference in the shine of the metal. And a lot of it, you'll feel it too. A lot of it, this is, to fill. And then we're gonna pull this one apart. They're fairly flush. I'm just basically taking off the burrs that the cutter left. Go this way. Just lightly. And with this thin of a ring, it shouldn't be too bad with soldering. It should go fairly quick. Around. I'm just looking at the face of the metal, and I can actually see a lip. So I'm just filing down. And I'm making sure to keep my file flat against the surface, so I'm not getting putting a weird curve on the metal. And I'm just looking for that kind of mirrored finish on the, so when I'm pushing the file, I'm trying to keep it as straight as possible when I'm doing that. So now we're going to form that infamous D form, just to bring these edges together so we can solder them. I'm going to overlap a little bit because you want that spring tension on there. And you'll want to spring it back and forth like this, and then bring it together, keeping the round part to the inside of the ring. And you want to have a flush fit on your soldering joint. Solder doesn't fill the gap, so it will only flow when the metal is touching flush. Can't be like that. It has to be flush. So when you're doing that, remember that, and you'll be doing great. There is, like I said, there is a learning curve with soldering. Do not beat yourself up. It's gonna take a little bit to learn and get it right. Just take your time, practice a lot. Test those joints, and I'll show you how to do that. And this thin of wire, you can literally manipulate it with your fingers. You don't need any special tools or anything. And you want that spring back because it's gonna hold the joint together while you're soldering. This is honestly the most tedious part of soldering, is getting the joint right that you'll be soldering. And a lot of times I will use my pliers to get it right. It's pretty good. Let's see about this one. And then I'm just making that D, kind of that D form. And then I'm just getting the tension. Pushing them past. And bringing them together so they butt up against each other. And I'm checking from the side angle as well to make sure that the wire is together. I'm gonna just set those down there and move all this stuff out of the way that I don't need. Now I am going to take, using the same cutters, and I'm gonna cut a couple pieces of solder here. And you might want to cut a few because sometimes the torch will blow the solder off. So you'll want to have it ready. And I know you're going to be like, how much solder do I use? Oh my goodness. Question for the masses. Honestly, it is a learning curve. You will want to err on the side of less is more with solder because it's more cleanup. If you, you know, if you do too much, but you're going to find that you're going to have to experiment with this. I cannot give you an exact amount on solder because it's such an individual kind of thing, and also depends on the size of the metal, and the, you know, the soldering surface and such. So I am sorry that I cannot give you a specific amount, but as you can see, I usually, what I'll do is I'll cut fairly small pieces of solder. And if I have to go back and use them, or use more, more, I will. I'll just resolder again. But usually I find that about this size here, and this is tiny, and it's flattened out, is significant for a ring seam, especially on this size of metal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this solder down, and then I'm going to take the ring and I'm going to set it on top of the solder, the seam of the ring on top of the solder. This will help for especially beginner, because it holds the solder in place when you'll find, I'll show you when the flux starts to bubble. Then you don't, because if you place it on top, it'll bubble and it might go crazy and go everywhere. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flux the ring. Maybe. There it is. Hold on. Hopefully my thing is not clogged. This one's not supposed to clog, but you never know. Flux is so crazy that sometimes it... All right, there. I'm gonna grab my flux, my handy dandy flux bean brush. And I'm just gonna dip it in here and grab some flux. And I'll fix my bottle later. And I'm just putting the flux on the seam because that's where I want the solder to flow. And I'm doing enough that it's going down onto the solder too. Literally takes that much. You don't need much at all. And this is going to be where I'm not going to do a coating on this because it's going to be a quick in and out. And I'm going to I'm going to turn off some of the lights in order for you to see the way the metal turns, the colors in which the metal turns. I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to have my soldering pick and my torch. Some people like to keep the torch in their dominant hand and not. Most of the time it's going to be the torch in the non-dominant and your pick in your dominant, because that way you can move it around. So I'm just going to light my torch, and you'll get instructions on your torch how to do that. And as you can see, okay, and I'm going to come in gently, not too fast, because we're going to heat the whole ring, trying to keep the heat around the perimeter of the ring and the inside. You don't need to lay it on top of the metal itself. And then once the ring gets to a certain temperature, you're going to see this light salmon color. And you're going to watch for a flash, and there it goes. So that one is soldered there. And then we're going to do the same thing for this one. Coming in, going around the perimeter and the inside diameter of the ring. And then once I see that light salmon, I know, and then you'll see that flash right there. You can come in and you can get it to flow again. And then I move the ring because it'll stick too. Once it cools, it'll stick. I'm going to turn off my torch. I'm going to set it to the side where it will not hurt anything, but you'll see there's solder there, solder there, and you'll see the ball, and it's sucked up through the seam. Let me grab the tweezers. It sucks up through the seam. You can also turn it over at this point. This is a good tip for a beginner. Before you pickle or anything else, turn back your torch on. If you feel like you haven't got that solder to come back up, just quickly come back in, and you'll see the solder flow, and you can just get it to temperature, and you'll see the solder suck up through the seam on the opposite side. Just go right in. You don't have to flux again, and you will feel the radiant of the heat and you'll see that silver flash of the solder flow through it. And then you're going to quench in the water. You'll hear that sizzling, and then you're going to drop it in the pickle. Quench, and just drop it in the pickle. You can use the tweezers, but do not touch them into the pickle. When you retrieve the rings, you'll use the copper tongs. And we'll let those sit for a little bit so they can clean up, and then we'll test the seams of the joints there. I always wash my tongs off with the water too, so it's not the pickle's acid, so you don't want that sitting on your tools. So get in the habit of rinsing your tools when you're doing that. And as you can see, that's the pickle over there. There is, you can also, after the pickle and you rinse it with the regular water, you can take and scrub them with just Blue Dawn, and dish soap and a brass brush. You can do a soft bristle brass brush, that type of thing. But, and then I'll take and I'll just kind of stir this in here a little bit, because your rings will get this kind of frosty white color, and then just rinsing those so that acid's not left on there. And as you can see, the process with thinner gauge metal goes really fast. Something to test your skills on is earring posts, and because you're soldering that small post onto a larger piece of metal. And if you really want to get good at soldering, that is a test for you. And you can line it up and do it, and don't get frustrated. You're going to melt posts. You're going to probably say a couple cuss words. But yes, you will definitely become a pro if you learn to master soldering a smaller piece of wire onto a larger component of metal or of sterling, you know, because usually you're soldering something that's, you know, tiny thin gauge, you know, 2018 gauge wire onto a larger amount of silver. So you're trying to find that medium of getting the base brought up to temperature while not melting the post at the same time. Yes, it definitely takes some skill to do that. So I'm gonna look at these real quick. Yeah, we're good, we're good. I'm gonna take them out real quick. So I'm gonna pull them out with the copper tongs. Just gonna put them down here. And as you can see, they have that. It doesn't take very long at all in the pickle. They have that nice, I'm just gonna take a polishing rag I have over here. You can use paper towels too. This is just a regular cloth, and then I'm going to just dry them off. I'm not doing anything, but just basically drying them off here. And be careful, because your soldering surface is probably gonna be warm. So always keep that in mind along with your tools. So that is the soldering joint. Not too bad with the cleanup. There's a little bit of excess here. I could honestly probably put this back on and pull it up through the joint a little bit more. We'll test the joints too. I'll bring this in so you can see. Soldering joint there, seam, not too bad. And see how much solder I used? You don't need that much, and that is a solid joint. And a lot of times when you quench, if that joint pops open, then you know that that wasn't a secure solder, but this is. And then you'll also know when you go to straighten this on the ring mandrel as well. This one is solid too. I always give it a good thing, and as you can see, you don't need much solder at all for these thin rings. All right, so now I'm going to, since we're done with this, I have a little bit of solder. It's not hot here, just mostly where you do the soldering. I'm just gonna set it to the side so I have some space to work here. And this is super soft because it's been annealed essentially when you solder it. And when I mean annealed, it means you soften the metal so it's now very pliable, and you can literally just slide it down the mandrel. And it doesn't take very hard taps at all for you to get this straight. And you don't honestly want to, because you're gonna increase the size with the hammering of this onto the mandrel. And don't be afraid to hit that solder seam, because that's going to test it. And you can see that it's already rounding out the ring. And it doesn't take hard taps at all, because you don't want to distort the metal. You just want to round it. And if you're going to texture a ring, you can make it probably a size and a half to 2 sizes smaller in order to put the texture, because when you put the texture on, it's going to make the ring bigger. And this ring, you can see, is a little wonky. We'll fix that with the bench block. I'm going to put it up this way so you can see it this way too. And I'm just holding it very lightly and just giving it, because this is the engaged wire, so it doesn't require a lot of force to get it rounded. And if you had a bad solder seam, this would more than likely pop it open. I'll probably round that out a little bit more, but I'm going to put it on the bench block real quick. And I'm going to take and put these like this. And I like these caps, these like hoppy pucks. And then I'm going to take it, I'm going to flip them, because they don't mar your metal and they keep it in place so it doesn't go flying out. Sorry for the noise, guys, but that will straighten it out. And then we're going to put it back on the mandrel. I'm gonna round it out just a little bit more, because I know that it probably needs it. And I'm gonna flip it, do the other side. It gets all nice and round and touching, it's kissing that ring mandrel the way it should. So it's nice and round. Do the next one. So we're going to bring it down. And then I'm going to flip it. But learning to solder will take your jewelry to the next level. You can do, like I said, stacking rings. You can do pendants, small pendants. I'm going to do a show you how to do. These are fairly big. It could be on my thumb, but basically this was for demonstration only. So now you're going to clean up the solder joint here, and you're going to use that half round file, the rounded side, for the inside, where this ring is the inside. Go bring it in a little bit more, and we are going to file that solder away lightly, not too much. It's just you're going to make that seam invisible. And you're not going to file in one place. You're going to roll with the curve, inside, outer side, and you're knocking off the excess solder, and you're all making that seam disappear in the inside. It doesn't take much. Make sure you never file too much away, because you cannot put the material back after it's gone. So keep that in mind. Now on the outside, we're going to use the flat file, And I'm going to just take, and I'm resting my hand on the bench block here. So, and I'm just going to go over the seam area where the solder is mounded a little bit. And I'm kind of rolling the file over because this is a needle file, so it kind of has a little bit of flex with it. And then I'm going to turn it this way. Make sure I'm not filing a flat spot in the ring. So you don't want that. You want to retain the roundness of the ring, the curvature of the ring. You can go from the side too. And I'm just making that seam disappear. I'm moving the ring all around, watching, because you can see where the file is going and where the seam is, and I want that seam to disappear, so like it was never there. Eternity band. That's why we have rings. Never-ending circle of love. And the reason I'm showing this, because honestly, I went to Troyer's Community Market this Saturday. It was so hot. We ended up leaving. A lot of people did because it was so incredibly hot that a lot of people, and I'm switching between the flat and the half round file. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going more into the inside, and you want to use the half round file for that, because if you don't, you'll file a flat spot inside. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I will answer them for you to the best of my ability and knowledge. Yeah, I thought I was going to get through this video without misbehaving dogs, but apparently not. And I'm just filing until I see the disappearance of the excess solder and the seam. And I'm making sure that I'm not taking away too much material, which means I am not pressing overly hard. Okay, I'm going to bring the next one in, round, half round, because I'm going to go into the inside, and I'm just resting the ring on the bench block, which you can do this. You're not going to hurt that bench block. Silver is really soft. And I'm getting the inside and the inside curve of the thing. And anyway, we went to Troyer's and it was super hot, but I had a lot of requests for rings this time. And I usually don't take the rings to, or I don't make rings for markets because they're such an individual thing, and then there's so many different sizes. But I think I'm going to make some simple rings in a bunch of different sizes, just like these little rings here, put some texture on and maybe put some small cabochons on there so they can make stacking rings out of them, see how it goes. But I got so many requests, I'm like, I should really do a video for the YouTube channel that shows how to solder, because I know when I was first learning, soldering was like a big step for me. And it really allowed me to open up my jewelry game. And because I have a lot of, well, girls in the family, I should say, friends and stuff that love their rings. And boy, they love those little stacker rings. Those are always a big hit. And I'm resting my hand on the surface so I'm not filing in the air, because you don't want that. And now what I'm going to do is now that I got, and you can keep the silver dust too. There's quite a bit of it when you file, so, and that can also be refined, so you know. And I'm just going to take this polishing pad and I'm going to go all the way around the ring. Now, I'm not going to do any refining of this ring, as in polishing or anything like that. I'm just going to do this polishing here, the file in this, because you can take and As long as you're not aggressive with the file, you can see the filing marks here. You won't have too much, but if you're making them for yourself and you're learning, this is a good way to do it. But you can just, this is simple, the least tools as possible. Now, if you want to go a step further, you can use emery paper, sandpaper, wet and dry or whatever, and you can start with 400, and then move up to 600 and then 800, and you can really get that those file marks out. But if you're not aggressive with the file, you should be able to just do this, and especially if you're making it for yourself or you're beginning and you don't have a ton of tools, you can totally do this and it will be great. So, as you can see, two lovely rings here. I'm going to back you out a little bit here. And you can make stackers, so you can make a lot. And this 16 gauge wire is fairly substantial enough that it's not going to bend, but it's dainty enough as well, and you can make stackers out of it. You know, when you get into rings and you're making cabochon settings and stuff like that, you'll end up knowing how to gauge what weight of wire you need as a band and stuff. But as you can see, soldering is not difficult. It just requires a lot of practice, and because there's variables in it with the amount of solder, what kind of flux you like, the different gauge of wire, the components that you'll be using, whether you're just going to be making simple rings or if you're going to make earring posts to solder onto earring, you know, components, and also onto pendants. And what I'll do too is I'm going to show you how to I think I'm going to try to show you how to do a simple pendant that's just a metal pendant, nothing like settings or anything, and then how to use a jump ring to make a bell. So you can do some silver stamped pendants with a simple bell, and then you can attach it to a chain and whatnot. So that'll kind of help with if you're wanting to up your game a little bit on the soldering. So I will work towards creating that tutorial as well. And like I said, if you have any questions whatsoever about any of the techniques that I used today, let me know, and I'll be happy to answer your questions as best I can. And like I said, you can use these simple tools to make stacking rings. Not hard, and great practicing for your soldering as well. You can just get some sterling silver wire, 16 gauge, and make a ton of simple band rings. Now, one more step onto this I'm going to show you real quick, and this is a nice step because you don't have to worry about those filing marks. You can put texture on the ring, but remember what I said, you'll want to make because this is coming in at just above a 10. You're going to want to put, you're going to want to make, if you're going to put texture on this, you're going to want to make the ring a couple sizes too small, because when you texture this is going to stretch this ring. So we're sitting at about 9 3/4. So I'm going to put some texture on this, and I'll show you how much it stretches the ring. You can texture the ring before you solder it close, but I would recommend doing it after for a beginner, because there's, you know, you have to worry about the soldering joint and if you're textured. But let me show you. So that was, now it turned it into a 10. So it literally a quarter of a size difference. And now you don't really have to worry about, you can put more to harder texture onto this if you wanted more, but But that's just a really simple way to put some texture on it. Also show you the different style of texture on this one. This one is 10 3/4. Now this is a different blunt. This was a sharp. The one earlier was a sharp. Get it in frame there, Shannon. Okay. And then now this one I'm going to use is a blunt. Using the smaller blunt side. And as you can see, I'm just spinning, I'm doing it on the mandrel, and I'm just spinning the whole thing together, and I'm keeping the ring pulled down on the mandrel as it stretches, so it's getting good contact with the mandrel and the hammer. But as you can see, you don't need much force at all to do this. And you can put as much or as little texture as you want on these rings, and this is more like a hammered finish texture. More subtle than this one. And I'll show you the size. I mean, it's hard to tell the difference on the camera, but you can see it in person. And then this one stretched it all the way down to an 11. So it depends on how aggressive you're going to do the texturing of how much bigger you're going to make the ring. So now you don't have to worry about too much about the polishing of the strike marks or anything. And I did not hallmark these because it's hard to hallmark, what I mean by hallmark is by putting the 0.925 stamp on here, letting people know that this is sterling silver. You can't really do it on these. I mean, thicker bands, I always hallmark them and make sure that I'm marking them, but these are incredibly hard to do, and it distorts the metal. Any hallmark will distort the metal a little bit, so you have to keep that in mind as well. So I think that's going to wrap up this video. So you can see that you can make simple stack rings or simple single band rings out of 16 gauge sterling silver wire. You can use fine silver as well. Fine silver you can fuse rather than solder, which maybe I'll make you a video on that as well, so you don't even have to use solder with fine silver. It'll solder together, it'll fuse together. This is a basic soldering setup that you can go through. If you have questions, like I said, leave it in the comments below. I'll answer them. I answer them personally myself. And if you're enjoying this channel, please like and subscribe. I'll keep making good content for you guys. And if you have any requests, let me know. I do read the comments, all of them, and respond to them. So you know, even if it's just to say thank you, it just knows that I'm actually reading them and I am getting your feedback, and I do appreciate it greatly. So, and until the next tutorial, I'll be seeing you.